Hey guys, welcome back to another Gaming Memories video. Here we are actually taking a look at Resident Evil Survivor, a light gun inspired shooter game that was released by Capcom back in the year 2000 across all the regions, Japan, North America and in Europe. The game essentially is a spin-off pretty much to the Resident Evil series, but it does continue on the story of the original events not long after the Raccoon City incident. It would also be the final game to actually be released on the PlayStation console itself, as games that were released after that would eventually be released on newer consoles, the likes of the PlayStation 2, Xbox and so forth. So the game actually uses a different play style. It uses first person style mechanics but with light gun elements. So it actually moves away from the likes of the typical pre-rendered third person style backgrounds with fixed camera angles that we had known to love from the original games. This was originally Capcom's first attempt at trying to get involved with first person survival horror. But in saying that, even though it is a Resident Evil title, the game didn't get the best of reviews, generally because of the lack of a really good plot to the story, even though it does tie in with the original kind of games. The controls and a lot of elements in the game were quite clunky, and graphically, although it was okay, it wouldn't have been as good compared to similar games that were out at the time. The game also reuses a lot of enemies from the original games as well, mainly from Resident Evil 2 and especially even the hunters from the very first Resident Evil. So you play as the role of Ark Thompson, and he is tasked with infiltrating an Umbrella facility in a nearby island known as Sheena Island, only to find out that the entire island has been contaminated with the T-virus. So in your typical Resident Evil affair, all the inhabitants all become pretty much infected with the T-virus, and then you have monsters pretty much roaming around. You have everything from the likes of lickers, hunters, zombies, even loads of like tyrants from Resident Evil 2 roaming around. Plus, in this game, compared to some of the other games, you do actually fight different types of enemies in the form of military grunts, or like kind of like mutated kind of soldiers that have actually been sent in to literally take out and eliminate any remaining like survivors, because Umbrella wants to clean up and not have any sort of evidence lying around. So your job pretty much is to try and survive the entire ordeal while also trying to get the information that you need to be able to unravel the story and the events leading towards the end of the game. But along Ark's journey, he eventually gets injured, and which leads him towards the start of the game where he has amnesia and he can't remember who he is, so he's mistaken as the actual bad guy of the game, thinking that he's actually him. So the story goes through the process of him trying to find his way and trying to gain back his memories as he goes through each of the scenarios in the game. The game itself, if you compare it to the original Resident Evil game, even though Resident Evil 1 has been considered to have one of the worst voice acting ever in a game, well, I would definitely think that this gives it a good run for its money, because the acting in this game here is definitely questionable and sometimes probably even laughable at times. But I will say that regardless of that, a lot of these games back in the 90s, early 2000s, voice acting was never really considered to be a great thing in games, because again, it was relatively new. Up until the mid 90s there was really no voice acting in games at all, so it was definitely a new territory. So it's only in the last 10 or 15 years with modern consoles that storytelling in games with the likes of voice acting has drastically improved, almost to movie style quality. But back then it wasn't really considered as much of an actual thing to even actually have a voiceover in a game. It was considered a privilege back then, but it still added to the fun of it. So the game has you running around pretty much in first person mode, and it has a similar style of control similar to the original games, that when you press like R1 on the controller and a reticle will pop up so that you can use that to actually shoot the enemy, so you can move it around on screen if you actually have a controller. Now if you actually have the likes of the Namco Negcon gun, you'd be able to use that instead. But I remember from my own experiences in playing it, you're better off just use a controller, even though it's slower and it's clunkier, but it actually, you can just play it just as well. Now that when it goes back to the controls are extremely clunky in the game. But again, it was Capcom's first attempt pretty much at trying to create a survival horror game in first person. But you could see where their ideas were, because they've pretty much always wanted to get involved with that genre, and they were always trying different versions of the game, even leading on to sequels like Survivor 2 that was based around Code Veronica. They'd also done like a Dino Crisis spin-off by the name of Dino Stalker, and eventually they go back to Resident Evil Dead Aim, all on the PlayStation 2, and they all tried to get involved with that concept, and it wasn't really until the more recent and last number of years, Resident Evil 7 Biohazard and the upcoming Resident Evil 8 on the likes of PlayStation 5 and more recent consoles, that Capcom have really perfected the formula of first person survival horror, because first person survival horror really has become a makeshift or a staple in the survival horror genre in recent years. So it is interesting to see the likes of the early adaptations and the early attempts at that genre. Even though they weren't as good, they still added something, and you could see where things have actually gone in time, and they have improved as the years have gone on. Even though this game didn't get great reviews, especially when you consider the other games in the series, especially when you look at the likes of Resident Evil 2 and mainly Resident Evil 3 that achieved phenomenal success in the series before everything moved on to more modern consoles. It was still a really good attempt, but at the same time it was also created by different developers as well, so it wasn't the same development crowd that actually worked on the original games. So there always kind of is a disconnect slightly with developers and some of the production processes when they're trying to work with new ideas, especially with a proven franchise. But there is a lot of replay value with the game, even though the campaign is quite short. If you want to unlock everything and gain access to a lot more documents and information about the story, it will require multiple playthroughs in order to gain access to all those items. But it is worthwhile actually doing it, and even though it's not the best Resident Evil, it is fun to actually just play through and to experience everything, because at different points in the game you will be required to select different areas to choose from, which you won't be able to go back to. Once you select an area, you have to move forward in that area, but you can also choose the other areas. If you play through the game again, you can also take a different turn or access a different point, and once you do that you will also be able to find hidden items again, find weapons you couldn't find before, even more powerful weapons. So there definitely is a good excuse and reason to want to play it more if you want to unlock more of the features the game actually has to offer. But I'd love to know your thoughts on Resident Evil Survivor for the PlayStation 1. Did you actually play it back in the day, and if so, what did you actually think of it? Did you enjoy it, or maybe not so much? Be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you'd like to see more style videos like this, and even horror games or more horror games that were released on the PlayStation back in the day, then make sure to leave a like on the video. Also be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to be updated with future videos. And as always, make sure to keep playing those classic games and enjoying them, and keep those gaming memories alive.
I have already sent the self-destruction system. This island will be gone in a matter of minutes. Adios.